Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my January 2023 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. I'm going to start with the nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. Also, I put chapter markers in all of my videos, so if there's anything you need to skip over or revisit, all of that is listed down below, as well as a lot of different links to a lot of different things, and you should probably subscribe. It just seems like a good idea. In January, I read 12 things for a total of 3,276 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so about 1,285 of those pages were actually about 38 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 10 adult books and 2 YA books. I read 10 novels, 1 graphic novel, and 1 novella. This month, the biggest chunk of what I read was fantasy and nonfiction, followed by contemporary, science fiction, mystery thriller, and horror. If you adjust by page count, not a lot changes. Nearly half of these books were from the library, but I also read books from publishers, NetGalley, friends, a book box, and some other form of free. I read 5 ebooks, 4 audiobooks, and 3 paperbacks. Most of my books were in the 300 to 399 page range, and nearly everything was published in the last 3 years. Half of these books were written by female authors, but there was more variety when it came to protagonist genders. In terms of setting, there were just as many books set in the US as in other worlds, followed by the UK, Canada, and Australia. In terms of diversity of subject matter, the majority of these didn't have any diversity worth mentioning, for which I blame Terry Pratchett and true crime, but I did read some books that were queer, feminist, or a combination of 2 or more intersections. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 1 2.5 star read, 2 3-star reads, 3 3.5 star reads, 4 4-star reads, and 2 4.5 star reads. Let's start with our lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? This is always the most awkward part because I want to shuffle over, so I only put the covers of books on one side of the video and not have to go back and forth, but I don't have a viewfinder, so we'll find out if this is far over enough or too far. I think it's gonna be okay. It might not be perfect though. My 2.5 star read this month was something I read for a local book club. It is called Sub Rosa by Amber Dawn. I've actually read a book of her poetry before, so going into this I expected to enjoy it. This one is about magical sex workers, and again that's all I really knew. And I was reading it for a local book club because there's a local brewery called Small Gods Brewing that has a literary theme, so all of their beers are based on books. So they have a beer called Sub Rosa which is based on this book, and they will be discussing it, or have already discussed it, at their local book club. They actually decided, since so many people were interested in the book club, to have 2 different dates, and because I hadn't read this by the time the last date passed, I am going to one next week. Although again, I didn't really like this book, so I don't know if I'm going to be welcome at the book club. Like I said, this one is about magical sex workers, and I knew that going into it. I have nothing against people who do sex work, so that was not in any way what I had a problem with this book. What I had a problem with this book is the main character doesn't really seem to have a personality or opinions about the things that are happening to her. Either way, one way or the other, I would like an opinion one way or the other on her circumstance. We never really seem to get that until much later in the book. And then also much later in the book, there's kind of maybe a reason why we don't get that. Like somebody else has some form of persuasion magic, but that's such a throwaway line so late in the book that I didn't like it. Essentially, this girl has been living rough for a while. She kind of moves around and will be at different flop houses or staying with different people. She's still a virgin when we meet her, and she knows she's going to have to get out of her certain circumstance soon because it seems like this guy is tiring of having her around all the time. And then all of a sudden, while she's dancing on a table in this bar, some guy like magically just comes in and whisks her off to his apartment. They have the sex, and then the next day she finds out, now you're a sex worker. We're going to take you to this place called Sub Rosa. You're going to have to do this trial, so you get a certain amount of money before you can actually be part of our house. And it's this whole big happy magical queer family, but is it really? I wanted to love this. I did not love this. Moving into my 3-star reads, the first one is a nonfiction called Sexual Fluidity Among Millennial Women. This one is based in Australia, but it also has case studies from the US. I believe maybe a couple from Canada. I believe a couple from Europe as well. I've read a decent amount of nonfiction recently, and this is one of the nonfiction types that doesn't really work for me. It's very, very textbook and very, very academic, which is what it was trying to be, so that's fine. But it's not exactly something that one would good read for fun. This book, obviously, based on the title, you can tell talks a lot about women who change their sexual identity throughout the years and what that might look like and the reasons for doing that. And there are several reasons why somebody might want to do that during their lifetime. Firstly, they come to realize some things about themselves. Okay, perfect. They change their sexual identity. They also see some stigma, so maybe they change it into a different direction. And this talked a lot about the different directions in which you can change it based on kind of a scale of being like exclusively heterosexual, exclusively homosexual, and then somewhere in the middle. And even though this is a lot about bisexuality, those categories in the middle never really had the label of bisexual, even though all of them fall under the label of bisexual or M-spec. So that was a little bit off-putting for me. Next, we have The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. This is the first book in the Discworld series, and if this is the first book I had ever read by Terry Pratchett, I probably wouldn't continue the series, because although this has a lot of the whimsy and the magic and the world building that I like from Pratchett, it doesn't have as much as his books usually do down the line. And also this was just such a weird journey and I didn't know where he was taking it. As we start out, we've got this wizard named Rincewind. I say wizard, but he was kind of kicked out of wizarding school. He doesn't really know any spells, except for there is one lodged in his head. He can't say it, otherwise things will go badly. He doesn't even know what the spell is, but the spell keeps trying to come to the forefront every once in a while, so that's already interesting to me. However, a foreigner comes to town and he ends up basically being the tour guide for this foreigner, and they go on this big long adventure, and I never really knew where it was going, what I needed to remember. We met so many people along the way and I just didn't know if I should care or not about these certain things that were happening. I'm reading this as part of a read-along called the Around the Disc in 800 read-along, and it's basically we are reading all of the Terry Pratchett books, basically one every 2 weeks until we are done. And by Terry Pratchett, I actually meant to say Discworld, because I assume he's written books outside of the Discworld, but we're exclusively reading the Discworld books in publication order. On to my 3.5-star read, the first one being the graphic novel that I read this month, and this one is called Planet Ardbeg. This is the first issue, and I think there are going to be a couple of more issues, which is interesting because it is a very limited idea of what you would get for a graphic novel. Basically, this graphic novel is put out by the same people that make the Scotch, that is called Ardbeg, and it's 3 different stories interwoven into how these different Scotches came to be, with this one character that's kind of seen throughout the stories. It is very, very short. It's only maybe about 40 pages, but for me, it was so lovely to have a bottle of Ardbeg and read this comic book in the bathtub, as I do, because that's something I do every Wednesday. I feel like I didn't actually say it, but we've moved on to my 3.5-star reads at this point. Planet Ardbeg was the first one. The next one is The Killer's Shadow. This is another nonfiction book, but this one is true crime, and it follows this guy who was really big in the FBI and how he basically found this one serial killer. I can't remember his name. It's one of those 3-name serial killers. You know how serial killers are always called by their full name? It's one of those. But also at some point he changed his name because he had the same name as his dad, and then he was also under various aliases at points, so I don't remember his name. It's fine. He doesn't need to be remembered because he was a terrible, terrible human being. I've been consuming a lot of true crime content over the last year or so, and this is something that I went into because it was recommended. However, it's written in a type of way that just doesn't work for me. I understand that this guy from the FBI, who I believe is Johnny E. Douglas, I believe he has had a phenomenal career, and I can appreciate that. However, when I go into a book about a particular case, I want to know the things about that case. I don't want to know kind of everything else to do with your career, and he didn't put everything in there. He didn't talk about every single case he'd ever done, but there was enough extra detail in it that wasn't really there to give context for the situation that I was just kind of like, if you're gonna write your memoir, write your memoir. If you're gonna write a true crime book, write about that true crime. But that is 100% a personal preference for me. Furthering my journey around the disc, I also read The Light Fantastic, which is the second book in the Discworld series and follows where we left off from The Color of Magic. This one already was so much better than the first book. Like, I don't want to say that the first book was garbage, because it was not garbage. However, you can see that Pratchett's humor and world building in this world is leaps and bounds better, and even though this book also had a lot of characters, he was able to actually give some characterization to some of them, and to get this into a more cohesive plot where I actually started to care about what was going on, because I could foresee that we were going to get to a conclusion of this part of the story. In this one, we are again following Rincewind. They are still on this adventure. Many bad things have happened, but we have an event that is coming up. That spell that is trapped in his head is coming to the forefront. Whether or not that's going to be said or not, and what those consequences are, that's all dealt with in this book. We also have some fun characters met along the way, such as Cohen the Barbarian, who is, I believe, 87 years old at this point. So yes, he's still a barbarian. Yes, he's still a legend, but he's older now, but still doing barbarian things, which is just fun, honestly. On to my 4-star books, another nonfiction book. This one is by Julia Shaw. Going into this one, I really wanted this one to be basically the bisexual version of Ace by Angela Chen, and it falls short on a couple of factors. It is trying to bring together all the culture and history of bisexuality, but there are a few places where it falls a little bit short for me. For example, it doesn't really talk about the fact that you can be bisexual and on the ace spectrum, which, hello, I am. And it also doesn't really talk about people who fall under the genderqueer umbrella, and it mostly says that because there's not a lot of research about that, but you could just, go ask some genderqueer people their experiences and include that, and that would have been enough for me, but that wasn't really the case in here. However, outside of those shortfalls, this was a pretty decent book. It did go into a bunch of different things that people will want to talk about when they talk about bisexuality, such as like, do people actually have threesomes and that type of stuff. And then it also talks about things like media representation and things of that nature. So it is a pretty decent book, but it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. Next, we have the horror novella I read this month, and that is The Dismembered. It gets kind of gruesome. You can probably tell from that title, but I somehow still didn't see it getting as gruesome as it did. I believe this one was set in the early 20th century, and our main character is a writer from the States who has recently broken up with his wife, so he's on this trip to Europe, and he meets this woman on the train. He actually ends up saving her from a situation, and she invites him back to her family estate because she's having some trouble there, and also feels like maybe they should at least give him a meal for having him help out. And while they are back there, some bad things go down. This one is not for the faint of heart if you don't like gross, gory, bloody things, because that definitely happens. And I was just kind of on the edge of my seat while I was reading this. It was also kind of fun to read this in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere, where we didn't have cell service or internet, so we couldn't like maybe get away if somebody broke into our cabin, which they weren't going to do. But it's the kind of thing that if you put yourself in what could be a creepy situation to read a creepy book, it's a fun time. Next, in a completely different vibe, we have The Cracked Spine by Paige Shelton. This is a very cozy mystery book set in Edinburgh, which is my favorite city in the world, and a city that I actually know fairly decently, at least the portion really close to the castle, because I used to give tours. So there were sections of this book where I was like, oh, I know exactly where you're talking about, and there were other sections where I was like, I feel like you only looked at a map and you don't know that there's a hill there, and you'd know that to go up that street or down that street would be quite different. But regardless, I had a lot of fun with this one. 1, it's in my favorite place. 2, it's a mystery. 3, it's a cozy mystery. And 4, it's set in a bookshop, which is just obviously something that appeals to me. I love my bookish books. This is all about a woman named Eleni. I believe she's from Kansas, and she ends up getting laid off from her job that she's been working ever since she graduated from university, and she decides to up and leave and go to work at this bookshop in Edinburgh, which honestly is so relatable. I up and left to just go move to Europe for a couple of years with my best friend when I was younger than this character, but still, it fits. Once she's there, she meets a bunch of different random characters who are all really fun and unique and interesting, and then there is a mystery to be solved. I won't tell you exactly what that is because you get to the mystery a little bit in, and I don't want you to know ahead of time what is going to happen and what they're trying to solve, because I didn't know ahead of time. This one had some twists and turns. I believe this is the first in a series, and I would definitely read more of this series. I'm just bad at picking up books in a series in any form of timely manner, so eventually, one day, maybe I'll get to it. My final 4-star book this month was another true crime book. It was called The Babysitter: My Summers with a Serial Killer. Picture this. You are, I think, in your late 40s, I want to say is how old this woman was at this point, and you wake up from this really weird dream where you were back like 9 years old on Cape Cod, and you were with this guy who used to babysit you all the time. His name was Tony, and you always had a great time with him. Like, he was your favorite person to spend time with during the Cape Cod summers because he was just fun and nice. He got you and your little sister ice cream all the time. He would take you on car rides, all that type of stuff. But in this dream, he gave you a really scary, creepy feeling. You don't really know why that would have been. So the next time you talk to your mother, who is not your favorite person in the world and with whom you have a very strained relationship, you ask her, do you have any idea why I would have a weird dream about Tony? And she goes, well, he did end up being a serial killer. So this is a thing that literally happened to one of the authors of this book. This book is authored by Eliza Rodman, who is the 9-year-old from Cape Cod. And then this book was also co-authored by Jennifer Jordan, who I'm going to imagine, just based on how it's written, did the Tony sections of this book, based on court documents and other research, as well as the factual novel he wrote while he was in prison. This book goes back and forth in perspective based on these summers back in, I want to say, the late 60s, early 70s. During these times where Tony was killing people but also being the babysitter to this child. And it's just such a good hook, and it was written in a narrative nonfiction way, so not a textbook nonfiction way. It was written in the, it was raining that day, or it was hot because it was summer, or those types of things. You've got all those details in there. So you can constantly forget this was a real story, and then you remember, yeah, no, Tony Costa killed some people. He definitely killed some people. Something else I also appreciated about this book is there are a lot of different disappearances that people had attributed to Tony Costa, and when you actually look into them, some of those people are actually still alive. I can hear sirens, and I don't know if you can hear the sirens, so I don't know if I should just keep filming or not. They're fading. I'm gonna keep going. On to my 4.5 star reads. There were 2 of them, and then I didn't have any 5-star reads this month, which is weird, but I feel like that also happened last January, so maybe it's just a January thing. My penultimate read on this list is The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. I really enjoyed this one. I've read 2 books previously by Aiden Thomas. I've really loved his writing before, and this one is such an intricate, interesting new world. Essentially, we have our main character, I believe his name is Teo, and he is a demigod, and in this world, there's kind of 2 different classes of demigods. You have the Golds, who have gold blood, I believe, and the Jades, who have green blood. I think the blood thing is accurate. I think that's the way you tell. I read this at the beginning of the month and I'm pretty sure that's how it went, but I don't want to be wrong. In any case, the Golds are basically like the superheroes. If people need help, these are the people that are trained to actually use their powers and come down and help people. Whereas the Jades are just kind of overlooked, like they're not even allowed to go to the same school as the Golds. They're not allowed to do any training. They're just kind of like there. But every 10 years they have to attend this thing called the Sunbearer Trials, where basically 10 children of gods are chosen to compete in this trial, and whoever wins this trial has to sacrifice the person with the lowest score to the gods so that the world can keep on going. For Teo, it's seen as kind of like a formality that he has to be there, so he goes and yeah, he ends up being one of the people in the trials, which is just so unfair. I was so mad when I listened to that, because I was listening to this at the gym, and I'm listening to it on a treadmill, and I'm already mad that I'm on a treadmill because exercise is not my favorite thing in the world. And then to hear the fact that he has to be in this ridiculous set of trials where he's not been training for it for the last 10 years like everybody else has, I was just so mad for him. This is the first in a duology, so I'm not going to go into the rest of what occurs in this book, but I do want to talk about how there was such a variety of characters. There's so many different types of magic, there were so many different types of things that the characters could do. There was also non-binary representation in at least 2 characters, which I thought was awesome. And I cannot wait to see how this situation plays out, because obviously you're left in an interesting place at the end of the first book in a duology, so let's see how it goes. The final book on this list is 6 Times We Almost Kissed and One Time We Did by Tess Sharp. Again, I've read a couple of books by Tess Sharp that I've enjoyed in the past. If she has anything else, I would also like to read it, because she's really good at writing really hard-hitting contemporaries, the kind of contemporaries where people are going through a lot of stuff and you really care about the characters, and this is no exception. In this book we have 2 girls. Their mothers are best friends, so they've always kind of been around each other. The 2 girls in question are Penny and Tate, and we get perspectives from both of them. When it comes to Penny, she's been having a very hard time recently, especially with her mother, who basically ignores her and hasn't really been a mother to her since her father died. That happened about a year ago. It was an accident that Penny was also in, and her mother just basically stopped being a mom and is kind of a terrible human being. On the other side, we have Tate. She is very close with her mother. She's never really had a father, which brought her and her mother even closer together. But growing up, her mother has always had health problems, so that's always such a really big concern for her. And basically the only thing she does for herself is swimming, because she is very good at it, and she figures that she might be able to get out of this this very small town on some form of scholarship, so she's been working towards that for forever. Obviously, as I mentioned, these two girls' mothers are best friends, and something happens with those mothers that brings these two even closer together, and they have to contend with the fact that there's always been a kind of attraction between the two of them, but whether or not they see that to fruition is part of what this book is. I mean, to be honest, the book kind of gives it away, but you don't know if that one time was good or if it wasn't. If you like slow burns, this is definitely one to pick up because you have all of these instances where they almost and they don't. But it is also a book that is going to punch you in the heart with the different things that the characters are going through. Like I said, I really enjoyed this one, so if you're into hard-hitting contemporaries, I definitely recommend it. If you want to hear me talk more about these books or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always linked down below. If you've read any of these, please let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!